Search efforts continue in Haiti with the help of the international community. The United States declares a state of emergency as Hurricane Henri makes landfall in the northeast as the storm Grace leaves Mexico for the Pacific. And the Taliban co-founder and political chief Abdul Ghani Baradar has arrived in the capital Kabul to form a new government. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm José Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. The group of Mexican search and rescue workers known as Topos continue to look for bodies and possible survivors that may still be trapped under the rubble following the magnitude 7.2 earthquake that shook Haiti last week. In the small port city of Le Cayes, the Topos International Group used an electronic device to search for possible life in the wreckage. The group of Mexican rescuers focused on Friday night on a quake-damaged two-story home where equipment that allows them to detect sounds beneath the rubble caught some noise. The Mexican rescue team, together with the Haitian Red Cross, worked all night, but no survivors or bodies have been found.
We have an instrument to detect life, and 5 times it has given us a reading that has made us suspect, though we cannot confirm it, that there might be a person inside that is breathing but not moving. We will be working to the limit of our ability, but the life detection instrument could have given us a false positive reading.
8 packages were handed out on Saturday to displaced families camping at a football field in the Haitian city of Le Cayes. The parcels containing food and sanitary items were distributed to those left homeless in the aftermath of the 7.2 magnitude quake. According to authorities, the earthquake killed nearly 2,200 people, injured more than 12,000, while hundreds remain missing.
The situation is not good. As you can see, it is raining. The sun is beating us. There is not a person who lives well. We all want to go to our homes. My house was smashed, collapsed. I don't have the right to sleep in the govt soccer field, and I need a house to live. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to find food.
Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed, along with United Nations Development Program Administrator Ashkim Steiner, traveled to Haiti to sympathize and show their solidarity with the Haitian people and government.
We saw once again the incredible resilience of the Haitian people who have suffered so much and are now mobilized to support their neighbors and communities in the aftermath of the earthquake. This is a moment that we believe that Haitian people come together. We saw an enormous amount of unity in the response to the earthquake, and so we believe that this can be turned into an opportunity for building back better.
Argentina has sent a humanitarian mission to Haiti through its White Helmets initiative. Doctors are among the 25 volunteers that headed to Haiti for at least 20 days. Also on board are medical supplies and medicines, as well as water purification tablets, blankets, and other emergency supplies to set up a level 1 healthcare facility.
The Argentinian aid is leaving today. It will be in Haiti for 20 days. We are taking medical equipment, doctors and paramedics are going. We are taking 3 dogs to locate victims.
And as a donation, we are going to bring double viral vaccines, which are essential for the wounds that the Ministry of Health has also given us, and all the medicines needed for primary health care.
The Prime Minister of Haiti, Henri, said that despite the general situation in his country, he will organize transparent elections.
I have pledged to do my utmost to put my country back on the rails of a functional democracy with the organization of good, free and transparent elections as soon as possible.
Israel has launched an antibody testing for children aged as young as 3, seeking information on the number of unvaccinated youths who have developed protection against coronavirus ahead of the new school year. Despite surging daily infections caused by the highly transmittable Delta variant, Israel's government insisted it wants to avoid the hardships and developmental setbacks caused by school closures. The National Serological Survey is focused on kids between the ages of 3 and 12 who are not yet eligible for the jab, which is nearly 1.5 million children. It is aimed at discovering how many children develop strong antibody protection against coronavirus.
I came with my children to undergo an antibody test to see if they ever contracted COVID-19 without our knowledge. If they were ever sick, then we will receive a green pass and an exemption from quarantine, also so that they will not have to undergo frequent PCR tests.
My son received a positive result for COVID-19 antibodies. Apparently, he contracted it and we did not know. That means he will get a green pass and be able to go to school safely.
In Martinique, hospitals are overwhelmed with the influx of COVID-19 patients. Soldiers who came as reinforcements from mainland France deployed 20 military intensive care beds in just a few days. France's government warned of an extremely serious COVID-19 crisis in the country's overseas territories, especially in the Caribbean. Martinique tightened a lockdown and told tourists to leave, while similar measures were also expected on the nearby French overseas territory of Guadeloupe. Authorities on Martinique announced that all the non-essential shops will be now closed. Beaches will also be closed and people can only go within 1 kilometer radius of their homes. There are now 1,200 cases per 100,000 inhabitants on Martinique, while only 22% of the population have received even a first dose vaccine.
The logistic challenge is to manage to interweave all the sources of supply, which are those of the university hospital and the health service, so that we can very quickly have a unit hosting resuscitation stations, which are functional for a patient. It is a rather complex environment to set up in 48 hours. It was a little logistical challenge, but we got there pretty quickly.
We were expecting a complex situation with a lot of patients, a lot of equipment to set up, and a lack of organization upon our arrival. But we were prepared for it, and in the end, we had the staff and the training for it, so it didn't scare us too much.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. authorities have asked millions of people living along the East Coast in the path of the tropical storm Henri to prepare for torrential rains and storm surges. Henri arrived in eastern Long Island. The weather phenomenon recorded maximum winds of 120 kilometers per hour on Saturday and was moving northward, located 290 kilometers southeast of Mount Pooh Point on Long Island. Intense winds and surge from potentially dangerous tides will affect distant areas east and west of the New Jersey coast. U.S. President Joe Biden approved the declaration of a state of emergency in the state of Rhode Island and ordered federal assistance to support the efforts of local authorities.
We're here today to open up a shelter to take care of clients' immediate emergency needs during this disaster.
This goes back towards Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Back then, they had the hurricane and some people were turned away from the shelters because they had their pets with them, and ultimately they didn't fare very well. So the federal government stepped in and said, now anybody who wants to go to an emergency shelter like this is allowed to bring their pets. So that's why we have the animal shelters here. We'll have an ACO on around the clock the entire day for as long as this is open.
Hurricane Grace has left at least 8 people dead in Mexico. It has caused heavy rain and strong winds on Saturday, causing flooding, power blackouts, and damage to homes. The storm made landfall in Mexico for a second time during the night near the Veracruz state as a major Category 3 storm, triggering warnings of mudslides and significant floods. The streets of Tecloclutla, home of about 20,000 people, were littered with fallen trees, signs, and roof panels as dawn broke. Grace was weakening rapidly over land, but still causing very heavy rains and flooding over portions of east central Mexico.
I turned around to go into the house, and that's when the roof came off the hill, and they were all down there, my wife and my 6 children. As they were taking them out, they took out my wife and my other children. They pulled out a 4-year-old. then an 8-year-old, a 2-year-old girl, and a newborn who was only 15 days old.
For the 6th consecutive weekend, several hundred people gathered in Paris to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's COVID health pass. This weekend's marches are organized by several different groups, like the Yellow Vest and right-wing politicians like Florian Philippot. The health pass makes vaccination essential to carry on with routine activities. According to official figures, last weekend, nearly 200,000 people took part in anti-health pass marches all around the country, down from the 237,000 who had joined protests the previous week. Australian police clashed with hundreds of anti-lockdown protesters in Melbourne and Sydney on Saturday, as officials reported the country's highest ever single-day rise in COVID-19 cases. Police used tear gas in Melbourne to break up crowds surging towards police lines, while smaller groups of protesters were prevented from congregating in Sydney by a large contingent of riot police. The protest comes as Sydney tightened its lockdown amid a growing outbreak of COVID-19 in the city. Sydney, of more than 5 million people, has been in a strict lockdown for more than 2 months now, failing so far to contain an outbreak that has spread across internal borders and as far as neighboring New Zealand. Members of the ethnic group Kemat fled to Sudan due to the increase of the armed conflict in the country. According to UN reports, around 200,000 people have been displaced from their homes in Amhara, of which more than 60,000 are sheltered in Sudan. The international organization also estimates that the conflict has left some 400,000 people in extreme poverty. The fighting in Tigray, northern Ethiopia, erupted in November when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops to dispose the Tigray People's Liberation Front in response to their alleged attacks on military camps.
The regional government attacked us through the Fano, the Amhara Special Forces and the Amhara militias. They were using heavy weaponry to bombard and burn homes.
The numbers are large. We are now in a school and the space is not enough for the current number of people. However, we have taken action. We have distributed plastic covers to prevent rain, and we have provided 3 houses and blankets to protect them.
Kenya's court has rejected a controversial proposal to amend the national constitution. Kenya's Senate representatives and lawyers reacted to the court appeal, rejecting constitutional reform in a fresh blow to President Uhuru Kenyatta, who had made new proposals and commands. Meanwhile, a 7-judge panel upheld early high court ruling that the way the reforms were introduced was illegal, a decision that will change the political landscape with less than a year before the country holds elections.
That President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has contravened Chapter 6 of the Constitution, and specifically Article 73(1)(a)(1) by initiating and promoting a constitutional change process contrary to the provisions of the Constitution on amendment of the Constitution.
We knew then that this process was fundamentally illegal, and what this court has done is to vindicate that position. The lessons are, number 1, we need to respect the people, and number 2, we need to focus more on issues of economy and supporting the poor person instead of altering our constitution.
In Malaysia, Ismail Sabri Yaakob was sworn in as the country's new prime minister following the resignation of his predecessor on August 16th. Sabri Yaakob was sworn in by the King of Malaysia, Sultan Abdullah Sultan Ahmad Shah, at the National Palace in a ceremony broadcast live in which he wore a traditional outfit. Sabri Yaakob replaces ongoing Premier Yudim Yassin, who resigned after losing the support of the lower house of Congress, which was seen by his detractors as a failure in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. The new Malaysian premier, meanwhile, received the backing of 114 of the 220 congressmen. And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay with us. Welcome back. The Taliban co-founder and political chief Abdul Ghani Baradar has arrived in the capital, Kabul. His presence comes as the group plans to unveil its new government. It's being reported that the Taliban are bringing experts from the country's former administration to help manage the transition. The Taliban are holding talks on ways to make the new government more acceptable to people in Afghanistan and for the international community, but they insist there will not be time for elections. The expected reopening of banks didn't happen. Only the ATMs were working with a maximum withdrawal limit of $200. Afghans queue outside banks to withdraw cash from ATMs in Kabul, with government buildings, banks, schools and universities remaining closed nearly 1 week after the Taliban seized power. Government employees in Kabul were blocked by Taliban militants from returning to their offices on Saturday, the first day of the Afghan working week. In the western Afghan city of Herat, not far from the border with Iran, local residents complain over the critical situation of the economy. One resident said that unemployment, poverty and misfortune are high.
In Afghanistan, things were expensive. There was war, and now things have become even more expensive. None of the authorities have paid any attention to this. Our people are facing unemployment, poverty, and misfortune. On top of that, there's war and suffering too. People are going abroad because of unemployment and increased prices. The government has not paid any attention to this. We want the government to focus on the problem so that Muslims can afford to buy things. Unemployment, poverty, and misfortune are high in Afghanistan.
An Indian Air Force plane carrying 168 people from the Afghan capital Kabul landed near New Delhi on Sunday. A spokesperson from the Indian External Affairs Ministry said the passengers included 107 Indian nationals and 61 from other nationalities. Meanwhile, another group of 87 Indians who were evacuated from Kabul to Tajikistan on Saturday on an Indian Air Force plane landed at New Delhi airport on Sunday. India began evacuating its nationals last Sunday after the Taliban swept into Kabul. The press trust of Indian news agencies say that around 400 Indians were believed to be stranded in Afghanistan.
The situation is very bad there. We were not sure if we would be able to leave or not, but we have been able to.
I've come from Afghanistan. The situation is not good there at all, and seems no chances of it improving.
A group of Turkish women have rallied in front of the Afghan consulate in Istanbul, chanting "You will never walk alone" in support of Afghan women after the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan.
We have come here to show that Afghan women aren't alone, to show them support. We came because we are forced to carry their voices. All of us here are by their sides. We are their voices. We call upon all women organizations around the world. We should never let women walk alone. We will never be alone. We are here to oppose the fact that Afghan women's lives are being taken away from them, that all of their rights are being taken away, and because we are against the Taliban seizing power. Women will fight for their rights, and we want to address the message to the world from here. Afghan women are not alone.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has held a press conference alongside the EU's Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel after a visit to a military base in northeast Spain that will serve as a reception center for Afghans arriving from Kabul who work for the EU.
The situation in Kabul and at the airport is frankly worrying, highly complex at this point. I would like to express my gratitude for the work being done, both by the Spanish diplomatic personnel stationed in Kabul and by the national police, who are staying to guarantee the security of the diplomatic personnel stationed there. And of course, the deployment of the armed forces, which is making it possible for this repatriation to take place.
It is our moral responsibility, and not only to help the Afghans arriving here in Spain, but also those who have remained in Afghanistan. And here I want to emphasize that the European Union is firmly committed to continue supporting the NGOs operating in the country.
Italy has evacuated hundreds of people from Afghanistan in the past 2 days thanks to the airlift between Kabul and Rome. Among those transferred to Rome were Afghan nationals who used to work for the embassy, Afghans who have relatives in Italy, and also those evaluated as in need of assistance or protection.
There are many families on board the aircraft, many women and many children. In their eyes, we have glimpsed the despair of leaving their homes in their own country. But without a doubt, they understand the opportunity provided by Italy to find a better future and a new beginning through this flight. In the eyes of the children, we certainly saw the greatest difficulties. They seemed the most lost. In our own small way, we try to alleviate their suffering by donating small sweets, candies, and toys, and we recognize their happiness at receiving these small gestures.
And a plane carrying 26 Indonesian evacuees from Afghanistan has landed in Jakarta. 5 Filipinos who were evacuated were also on the flight, according to Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi.
All 26 Indonesians were evacuated. All are in a good condition. One note, one diplomat is unwell, but not due to COVID-19. In addition to Indonesian citizens, this evacuation mission also carried 5 Philippine nationals whose government had requested assistance.
Hundreds have gathered in central London to protest the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban and to show solidarity with Afghan people. The Taliban senior leadership is gathering in the Afghan capital to begin mapping out an inclusive government as desperation deepened for tens of thousands still scrambling to leave the country. The UK will double its humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan this year, bringing it to 286 million British pounds, Foreign Minister Dominic Raab announced on Wednesday. The Israeli army has struck Gaza after clashes between its troops and Palestinian protesters. The clashes on the border left dozens injured, including an Israeli policeman and a 13-year-old Palestinian boy, who were both critically wounded. The clashes come exactly 3 months after Israel and the Hamas rulers reached a truce following their deadliest fighting in years. The president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, affirmed that his government will give priority to addressing the COVID-19 pandemic and creating stable conditions for the country's economic progress. In a speech in a parliament, the president stressed that his government's immediate priority is to control the COVID-19 pandemic by speeding up the vaccination process. He said as his second priority, working to improve the national economy and solve people's livelihoods problems, as well as eradicating production. On Wednesday, August 25th, the Congress is scheduled to give its vote of confidence to the proposed cabinet, in which several of those elected were ministers during the administration of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and members of the Corps of the Guardians of the Revolution.
Speeding up public vaccination, enforcing hygienic protocols, and boosting the level of medical treatment is a top priority the government is pursuing.
And we come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.